This Vitarka part of our experience is described in the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali in the 17th Sutra of the first pada. Does anybody know what the first pada is called? Samadhi pada. Because it is the what of yoga. So what is yoga? It starts that this chapter tells us what yoga is. And then the second pada is sadhana pada. Sadhana can be translated as practice. So the second chapter tells us how to practice it. And the third tells us what happens when we practice it, and the fourth tells us the potential. Yeah, sort of big potential of practicing it. So in this first pada, Samadhi pada, he's talking a lot about mind, and so there's a lot of correlations we can draw with what we've been talking about in the afternoons and with meditation practice, right? And so part of this link that I found really helpful in terms of making the connections between the practice we're doing here, moving in our bodies, and the practice we do on the cushion, mostly still in our bodies, right? So the body's moving, or the body's like still. It's very different dynamically in terms of the physicality of the practice. But what's happening internally is very similar, and there's really important connections that we can make that can make it so much more accessible to see how this movement can become a moving meditation. Okay? So when he's talking about this, he says Vitarka, Vichara, Ananda, Asmita, Rupa Nugamat, Samprajnataha. And Samprajnataha is a derivative of Samadhi. So it's very much related to this word Samadhi. And Samadhi is often equated with this sort of state of a higher consciousness, a meditative state of some sort. And there are levels to these meditative states. So part of what he's talking about in this sutra is related to those levels. And what he's saying is that when we approach anything, we can work through these levels. So a very good example that I think we can use, because we all do it, is these asanas. So when we come into an asana and it's new, we have a lot to learn, we have a lot to figure out. So a translation of this Vitarka stage is conjecture or analysis. You're like trying to figure shit out, right? Then you start to figure it out, so things start to become a little bit more familiar, and it starts to gain some ease and familiarity, and you start moving a little more steadily. And that whole process, there's a lot of stages within the Vitarka that you're working through. But eventually, you start to get, this is where I think in Ashtanga, this can be equated to when you don't have to think about what comes next, when the postures just start to become part of you, and you can just move through them without that, like, oh, I gotta do this, and then I gotta do that. That starts to fade away, and you're embodying these movements, these postures, right? And so then you can move into the Vichara stage. Vichara means reflection, or contemplation, right? So these are contemplative practices, meditation is contemplative practice. So we get more familiar, and that meaning of meditation in Tibetan Gom to become familiar with. So that's a lot related to this Vitarka and Vichara stages. Then through that reflective stage, we really start to know, we tap into this inner knowing that we have, this awareness that's always with us, this wisdom that's always with us, that's innate to our being. And then we move into these latter two stages, Ananda and Asmita. Now, Ananda is often translated as bliss in the yoga world. And I think there is an element of that here, but it's more about because you have become so familiar and so you can peel away these layers, you can let go of your tendencies and habits, your preconceptions, your expectations, you start to get closer to your true nature. And when we get close to our true nature, yeah, it's blissful, it's beautiful, it's open, it's free. Even if you were wrapped in chains, it's free. And you know that, and you connect with that. And then you move even deeper to a place where you forget where you are, you forget who you are, you've experienced selflessness, you've experienced the opposite of the constricting ego that is a klesha. Because asmita, the way most people think about it is they jump right to the kleshas. It's a negative. But every negative has a positive. And this is the healthy side of your ego that you're experiencing through the work of these stages. And we do that on the mat, we do that on the cushion,